The galaxy had been quiet for 9,000 years. 7 civilizations lived together under one banner. They called themselves the Vildan Concordium. They were proud of their long peace. They built ships that grew like trees, not like machines. They taught their children that war was a sickness of young minds. Any race that learned wisdom, they said, would learn to put down its weapons. They were sure of this. They had built their whole world on this belief. Then the Chikai came. No one had heard of them before. They came from the dark space between galaxies where no one had thought to look. Their ships moved like a black tide. They were not one ship, or 10, or 100. They were millions. The Chikai were insect-like creatures with sharp limbs and many eyes. They did not have one mind. They had a hive mind. Like bees, and like bees they came to take, but they did not take honey. They took worlds. The first world fell in 2 days. The Chikai swarm landed and ate everything. The trees, the cities, the people, the very rocks of the planet. When they were done, only bare stone was left. Then they moved on to the next world. And the next. And the next. The leaders of the Concordium were shocked. They had not seen war in so long. They had no plan for this. But they trusted their old ways. They sent peace messengers. Messengers flew out in beautiful living ships carrying gifts and kind words. The Chikai ate the messengers and the ships too. They sent more messengers, thinking the first ones had failed by accident. The same thing happened again and again. At last the Concordium sent a fleet. It was the biggest fleet they had built in 1,000 years. The ships were lovely to look at. They were grown from a special tree-like material. They had soft lights and gentle shapes. The crews wore white robes. They believed that any creature, even the Kraikai, would stop when it saw such beauty and such strength together. They believed wrong. The battle lasted 4 hours. The Concordium fleet was eaten alive. The Kraikai swarmed over each ship like locusts on a field of wheat. The crews tried to run. They could not run fast enough. The hive consumed them. News of the loss spread through the 7 worlds of the Concordium. Panic followed. The leaders met in secret rooms. They argued. Some said they must build weapons. Others said no, that to build weapons would be to become like the Kraikai. Better to die clean, they said, than to live as monsters. While they argued, more worlds died in the middle of all this. One woman did not have time for arguments. Her name was Laurentia of Sorrel. She was an ambassador of the Sail people, a tall and slim race with silver skin and large dark eyes. Her home world had 3 rotations left. 3 days in human terms. Then the Kraikai would arrive. Then her people, all 6 billion of them, would die screaming. Laurentia sat alone in a quiet room on the council station. She had not slept in many days. Her eyes were red. Her hands shook. She had just come from another long meeting where the leaders had argued in circles. She had spoken. She had begged. She had shown them pictures of children. On her home world, they had nodded. They had said kind words. They had voted to send more peace messengers. Laurentia had walked out of the room. She had not gone back. In front of her was a screen. On the screen was a list called the Forbidden Catalog. It was a list of races that the Concordium had marked as too dangerous to talk to. There were 97 names on the list. 96 of them were now followed by a small mark. The mark meant the race was extinct. They had killed themselves, all of them, in their own wars and madness. The Concordium had been right to stay away from them. Their own violence had eaten them. Only one name on the list did not have the mark. The race was still alive. The name was written in old Concordium letters, but next to it was a translation in many tongues. It said Sol 3. Earth. The humans. Next to the name was a red tag. The red tag said, Class Omega Behavioral Hazard. Do not contact. Larenthi read the file. It had been written 2,000 years ago, when the Concordium had first found Earth. The writers of the file had been worried. They said that humans were a young race, but already they had nuclear weapons. They had killed each other in great numbers in their own wars. They had done strange and cruel things to their own kind. They had made weapons that could end their own world many times over. The writers had judged that humans would soon kill themselves, so they sealed off Earth's part of space. Behind a quarantine wall, they put up warning signs, and they waited for the humans to die. The file had not been opened in 2,000 years. The lock on it was old, but it would still open for a high-ranked ambassador. Larenthi was still a high-ranked ambassador. For now, Larentha's hand moved over the screen. She knew the rules. To open contact with a Class Omega race was a crime. The punishment was exile or worse. But our people had 3 days, and then nothing. 3 days, and her mother and her sisters, and her children, and the old woman who sold sweet bread on the corner of her street, all of them would be gone. She thought of the silent stars. The Concordium had sent calls for help to other races outside the Alliance, old friends, distant cousins, neighbors of long ago. None had answered. The strong races had pulled back behind their own borders. The weak races had hidden. No help would come from the known galaxy. The Concordium was alone, or almost alone. Her hand pressed the screen. Forbidden catalog opened. The lock on the human file broke with a small sound. A new screen appeared. It said, Open channel to Sol 3. Yes, no. Larenthi closed her eyes. She thought of her oldest daughter, who was 8 years old, who liked to sing and who could not yet read very well. She thought of how the child would die. She did not know how a silent death looked under cricket claws. She did not want to know. She pressed yes. Signal flew out into the dark, faster than light, on old paths that had not been used in 2,000 years. It crossed empty space. It passed dead stars and cold planets. It moved through the broken pieces of the quarantine wall, which had cracked long ago because no one had cared enough to keep it strong. It came at last to a small yellow star and a blue and green planet that turned around it. On Earth, in a quiet room, very far away, a light began to blink. Larenthi sat back in her chair. The signal was sent. There was no taking it back. She did not know what would answer. She did not know what humans had become. In 2,000 years of silence, maybe they were dead too, like the others on the list. Maybe the file was wrong and they had killed themselves long ago, and no one had updated the record. Maybe the signal would just fly out forever, finding nothing, or maybe something would answer. And then she did not know what would happen at all. She thought about leaving the room. She thought about telling the council what she had done. She did not move. She just sat there and waited and watched the small blinking light on her screen that meant the signal was still going, still reaching, still asking. Outside her window the stars burned cold and far. None of them spoke. None of them would help. She had begged the great races to come. She had begged the wise races. None had answered, but somewhere out there on a small blue world that no one had watched in a long time, something was beginning to wake up. And it was listening, and it had been listening, in fact, for a very long time, with patient ears for a call exactly like this. The signal reached Earth on a quiet morning. It came into a listening station built deep into a mountain in a place once called Switzerland. The station had been built 50 years ago. Its only job was to watch the old quarantine border for any sign of activity. For 50 years the station had heard nothing. The men and women who worked there read books and played games and sometimes wondered why the job still existed. On this morning the screens lit up. Within 10 minutes every senior officer of the Earth Defense Coalition knew. Within an hour the leaders of every nation on Earth and every colony in the solar system were awake and meeting. Within 3 hours the answer had been written and sent. The whole thing happened with the speed of a machine that had been kept oiled and ready for a long time. Earth was not the same. Earth, the Concordium, remembered 2,000 years had changed many things. The humans had not died as the Concordium had thought they would. They had come close. There had been wars that almost ended them, and sicknesses that almost ended them, and machines they made that almost ended them. Each time they had pulled back from the edge by the smallest measure. Each time they had learned. Each time they had become harder to kill. They had spread first across their own world, then to their moon, then to Mars and the moons of the gas giant, then to deep space stations and to artificial worlds spun from asteroid metal. They had 10 billion people now spread across the solar system. They had ships of many kinds. They had weapons of many kinds. They had no enemies because they had no neighbors, but they kept the weapons anyway. They kept them ready. They cleaned them every day. The old people remembered why, more than that, the humans had spent the long, quiet years getting ready for something. They were not sure what. Some of them thought aliens would come one day and not friendly ones. Some thought the universe was just a hard place and you should always be ready. Some thought it was foolish to keep so many weapons when there was no enemy to fight. The arguments went on for a long time, but every time someone said the weapons should be put away, someone else would tell an old story from the bad years and the weapons would stay. Laurenti traveled to Earth in a Concordium ship. The Concordium leaders did not want her to go. Some called her a criminal, some called her a fool, but she went anyway. She had broken the old rule, and now she had to see what she had set free. As her ship came near Earth, 4 small human ships came out to meet her. They moved in ways her sensors could not follow. Her ship's computer kept losing them and finding them again. The 4 ships flew around her ship in tight circles. They did not say hello. They did not signal at all. They just flew. After a while, Laurenti understood. They were showing her what they could do. They were saying, "We see you, and you do not see us." Ships led her down to a landing field in a place called Geneva. When she stepped out of her ship, soldiers stood waiting. They were tall and quiet. Their armor was dark gray. They did not point their weapons at her. They did not need to. She felt the threat in the air, like a smell. A woman walked forward. She was older than most of the soldiers, with short gray hair and brown skin. She wore a uniform with a single silver mark on the collar. Her eyes were calm and tired and sharp. All at once, Ambassador, the woman said, I am Fleet Marshal Idris Okonkwo Vance. Welcome to Earth. Please come with me. We do not have much time. They walked to a building made of stone and glass. Inside, a large room held many screens and many maps. Officers sat at desks. They were already at work. Larenthi saw maps of Concordium space on the screens. She saw lists of Chica numbers. She saw battle plans being drawn and changed and drawn again. The humans had been working since the moment the signal arrived. There were small lights on the walls blinking in patterns. There were fresh cups of coffee on every desk. The air smelled of metal and paper and tired people. You move very fast, Larenthi said. We have had 2,000 years to wait, Okonkwo Vance said. We did not waste them. The marshal sat down across from Larenthi. She did not offer food or drink. She did not make small talk. She put her hands flat on the table and began to ask questions. How many Chica? How fast did they breed? How long did they live? What did they eat? What did they fear? What had killed even one of them ever? How did their hive mind work? How far did the link reach? What happened to a xylocane when the hive could not reach it? What were their ships made of? What did they smell like? Did they sleep? The questions did not stop for 2 hours. Some questions Larenthi could answer. Some she could not. The ones she could not, the marshal wrote down on a list. By the end, the list was long. We will help your Concordium, Okonkwo Vance said at last. We will fight the xylocane. We will end the threat. But there is a price. Name it, Larenthi said. After the war, when the threat is gone, we will not go back behind our wall. We will have a seat. A real seat. A voting seat in whatever government rules the stars. Equal to any other, we will be heard. Always. And that is fair, Larenthi said. I cannot promise it for all the Concordium, but I will speak for it. That is enough. For now, the marshal stood. There is one more thing, Ambassador. I want you to see something so you understand what you have asked for. They went deep underground. The walls were thick, the doors were thick. They came at last to a great hall lit with cold white light. The hall was full of weapons. Larenthi did not know what they all were. Some looked like missiles. Some looked like small jars. Some looked like nothing at all, only smooth black shapes that hurt her eyes when she looked at them too long. These are the Ares vaults, Okonkwo Vance said. Every weapon humans built for use against other humans in the bad years. Diseases that pick out one kind of person and leave others alive. Bombs that burn for 100 years. Machines that take apart any matter, atom by atom. Things worse than these. We made them. We did not use them in the end. But we did not destroy them either. We kept them for a day like this. Larenthi looked at the rows of weapons. They went on and on and on. You want to use these on the Cricky, she said. We want to do whatever works. The marshal said, that is the only rule we have in war. Whatever works. The Concordium has rules about clean fighting. We have one rule. The threat ends or we end. There is no third option. There has never been a third option. In our history, Ambassador, you should sit down. The next briefing will be hard. Larenthi sat. Her legs did not feel strong. She watched as the marshal began to speak about the war that was coming. Marshal Okonkwo Vance spoke for 2 hours. She did not raise her voice. She did not show feeling. She just talked in plain words about what humans were going to do. To the Kriki, she talked about how many ships would be sent. She talked about how many bombs would be dropped and where. She talked about how many human soldiers would die and how many Kriki would die, and what the worlds would look like when the war was over. Larenthi listened. Sometimes she felt sick. Sometimes she wanted to argue. Once she did argue, the marshal listened politely and then went on with what she was saying as if the argument had not happened. Larenthi understood slowly that the plan was already made. The plan had been made in some form a very long time ago. Humans had been thinking about a war like this for 2,000 years. They had thought about it from every angle. They were not asking her permission. They were just telling her, out of politeness, what was about to happen. And she began to understand, slowly, that she had not woken up an army. She had woken up something much older and much hungrier and much harder to put back to sleep. The human fleet did not look like a fleet. It looked like a great storm of metal and light pouring out of Earth's solar system. Ships of every shape and size flew together. There were huge battleships with thick armor. There were small, fast ships that moved in groups of 10 and 20. There were old mining ships that had been turned into weapons of war by adding guns to every flat surface. There were ships that no person flew. They were run by smart machines that thought for themselves and did not ask permission for what they did. There were also stranger things in the fleet. There were ships shaped like long needles with no clear weapons on the outside that nobody seemed to want to talk about. There were ships shaped like hollow balls full of water that carried scientists. There were ships that looked broken from the outside on purpose to fool an enemy. There were ships made of ice, grown out in the cold space beyond the gas giants that would melt away and leave nothing behind after a battle. The humans had built so many strange things over 2,000 years. Now all the strange things were going to war. Concordium watched it come. They had asked for help. They had not known what help would look like. Many of them watching the dark cloud of human ships move through their space began to feel afraid for the first time of something other than they. Chikai, Larenthi traveled with the human fleet. Her ship was the flagship called Endurance. Marshal Okonkwo Vance was on board. So were many other commanders. The ship was huge. It was longer than any Concordium ship Larenthi had ever seen. Its hull was scarred with marks from old battles, even though the ship was new. Larenthi asked about the marks. She was told that the marks were put there on purpose to remind the crew that no ship was safe and no battle was won until it was won. The first meeting between the human fleet and the Cathar Kai swarm happened above a Concordium world called Tessa Prime. The Cathar Kai had begun to land there. The ground forces of the swarm were eating the cities. There were still living people on the surface, hiding in caves and basements, sending out weak signals for help. The Cathar Kai swarm in space was big. It was bigger than any swarm the Concordium had fought. It had many thousands of ships. The hive mind of the swarm felt the human fleet approach, and it felt no fear. It had eaten every fleet it had ever seen. The humans did not start the battle the way Larenthi expected. They did not fly in close. They did not shoot first with their main guns. Instead, far away, 3 small human ships moved into a special place in space. They each carried 1 small bomb. The bombs were dropped. The bombs flew into the heart of the system's small star. The star died. It did not blow up. That would have been simple. Instead, it folded inward. A great wave of strange energy washed out from where the star had been. The wave hit the Cathar Kai swarm. Half of the swarm broke apart. Their ships came to pieces. The other half tried to turn and run. The humans did not let them run. You killed a star, Larenthi said. Her voice was small. There were people on the planets here. The people on the planets were already dead, the marshal said. She was watching the screens. She was not looking at Larenthi, or they will be in 2 days. When the Krykai finish, we cannot save them, but we can use the star to save the next world. You killed a star, yes, the marshal said. We have more bombs. The galaxy has more stars. We will speak about the cost later, Ambassador. The war is happening now. The human ships moved in. They did not fight in lines or in clean shapes. They fought like a pack of wolves. Small ships ran in and bit and ran out. Big ships came up from below and took out the Krykai capital ships. Drone swarms poured into the gaps. The drones were small things with simple bodies and 1 weapon each. They were cheap to make. The humans made millions of them. The drones did not run from anything. They flew straight into the eyes of the Krykai ships and tore them open. Then came the boarding teams. This was the part that Larenthi could not understand. Human soldiers in small ships flew up to live Krykai hive ships and broke in. They walked inside. They walked through halls full of Krykai warriors. They did not run. They did not panic. They moved in small teams of 4 or 6. They cleared rooms 1 by 1. They were calm. They did this work the way a farmer works a field. Larenthi watched the live feeds from inside the hive ships. She saw a young human soldier, maybe 20 years old, kneel down next to a wounded Krykai warrior. The human took out a small tool. He cut the warrior open. He looked at the parts inside. He spoke into a small microphone. He listed what he saw. He noted what made the warrior react. He noted what made it stop reacting. He worked for a long time. The warrior was alive for most of it. When he was done, he stood up. He moved on to the next warrior. The data the soldier sent went straight to other human ships. New weapons were made. New gases were mixed. New diseases were grown. They were sent back to the front line. Within an hour, the humans were learning the Khazari body fast and using what? They learned to kill more Khazari. Khazari, this is cruel, Larenthi said. This is fast, the marshal said. Cruel and fast and slow and kind all give the same end. We choose fast. The Khazari do not feel pain the way we do. Their bodies do. But their minds, the hive mind only, feels loss. We are teaching the hive what loss tastes like. It has never tasted loss before. It will remember. The battle ended in 6 hours. The Khazari swarm at Tessa Prime was destroyed, not driven off. Destroyed. Every ship was broken. every warrior on the ground was found and killed. The humans even hunted the small flyer creatures that the Khazari used to scout. They left nothing behind. Then they moved to the next world. In the days that followed, the human fleet pushed deeper into Concordium space, where the Khazari had spread. World after world, they fought and they won. The Khazari began to do something they had never done in any record. They began to retreat. It was a small thing. At first, a few hive ships pulled back from a battle they could have won. The humans noticed it. They followed. The hive ships fought back, but only weakly. They were trying to lead the humans into a trap. The humans saw the trap. They went around it. They came at the trap from behind. They destroyed the ships waiting in ambush. And then they came back and destroyed the bait ships too. After this, the Catharchi changed. The hive mind, which had only ever known how to attack, began to learn fear. The fear spread from one warrior to another, slowly. Like a sickness, some of the warriors began to act in strange ways. Some of them stopped fighting. Some of them sat still in their ships and did nothing until human boarding teams came and finished them. The hive was breaking. The humans saw it. They pushed harder. Lyra sat one night in a small room on the Endurance. She watched a feed of human marines walking through a hive corridor on a planet very far away. The marines were calm. They moved in time with each other. They cleared room after room. They did not laugh. They did not shout. They worked. They worked the way her people worked in their gardens at home on slow mornings, and she understood then why the Concordium had quarantined Earth 2,000 years ago. It was not because humans were violent. Many races were violent. It was because humans had taken their violence and trained it the way a farmer trains a dog. They had not killed it inside themselves the way the Concordium had tried to do. They had taught it to sit and to wait, and to come when called, and when it came hungry, and worst of all, the humans were not ashamed of it. They did not hate this part of themselves. They had made peace with it long ago. They had given it a job. The job was to keep the children safe. And it did the job very, very well. Catharchi began to lose. World after world, the human fleet drove them back. The hive mind, which had never known fear, began to act in ways it had never acted before. It pulled back its swarms. It gathered them in tight groups. It tried to make walls of itself. The walls broke when the humans hit them. Then the hive scattered. Then it tried to gather again. It did not know what to do because nothing like this had ever happened to it. It was learning. It was learning slowly, and the humans were learning faster. The Concordium worlds were saved. One by one, the people came out of their basements and their caves. They saw the sky again. They cried, many of them. Then they saw the human ships in the sky. They saw the marks on the sides of the ships. They saw the flags. And many of them, after they had stopped crying for joy, began to feel a different kind of fear. Slow and cold, the Concordium leadership met in secret. They had won. They were winning. But the humans had taken much more than the Concordium had thought they would take. They had set up bases on 20 Concordium worlds. They had moved their weapons. There they had begun to build factories. The factories made human ships and human guns. They were not asking permission. They were doing it, and the humans had begun To change the war, this was the worst part. They had taken Kai bodies in Kai ships, and they had broken them apart, and they had begun to mix them with their own things. Human ships now had Kai armor on their hulls. Human soldiers had Kai gases in small bottles on their belts. Human factories had begun to grow new creatures, mixed creatures that were part human-made machine and part Kai flesh. Mixed creatures fought for the humans. They did not have hive minds, they had simple minds. They obeyed. They are becoming worse than what they fight, said one Concordium leader at the secret meeting. He was an old man of the Tellurian people. His skin was blue and his eyes were yellow. We must stop them now, while we still can. And how would we stop them? Said another leader. She was a young woman of the sail, like Larenthi. Their fleet is bigger than ours. Their weapons are stronger. They have already broken our quarantine. They are already inside our space. The only thing that could stop them now is the Cathar Kai, and they are killing the Cathar Kai for us. Maybe the cure is worse than the sickness, the old man said. Maybe it is, the woman said. But it is here. Larenthi was not at this meeting. She was on the Endurance deep in former Cathar Kai space. She had asked Marshal O'Connell Covens to speak with her in private. They sat in a small room with one window. Outside the window was a planet that had been a Cathar Kai breeding world. The planet was now a ball of black glass. The humans had glassed it the day before. I need to ask you something, Larenthi said. And I need a true answer. Ask the Marshal said. Why this much? You could push them back without all this. You could win without the cutting and the mixing and the glassing of worlds. Why do you go so far? What do you want? The Marshal was quiet for a long time. She looked out the window at the glassed planet. Then she spoke, and her voice was soft. Ambassador, I will tell you something we do not say much, even to each other. Humans are not cruel because we like cruelty. Humans are cruel because we have learned over a very long time that mercy shown to a thing that does not understand mercy is just a slow way to die. She turned and looked at Larenthi. On my world long ago, when we were one country fighting another country, we sometimes stopped fighting before the end. We left the other side alive. We let them keep their weapons. We let them keep their leaders. We told ourselves we were being kind. We told ourselves they had learned. And every time, every single time in our history, they came back. In 10 years, in 20 years, and 100 years. They came back and they killed our children. So we learned that some enemies do not stop unless you make them stop. The Kai are this kind of enemy. If we leave one nest alive, they will breed back. If we leave them with one good ship, they will build a fleet. If we leave them in their hive mind whole, they will think the way they always thought, and they will come again. So we are not just killing them. We are teaching them. What? Teaching the hive mind, the deep part of it that goes from one warrior to another, that the smell of a human is the worst thing in the universe, that the sound of human ships means death, that when they think of the small blue planet we come from, they should feel a fear so deep that they will not move toward it for 1,000 years. We are putting a mark on them, Ambassador, a mark that will stay even after we are gone. Larenthi was quiet. She thought about this, and the worlds you glass, the stars you kill, those are also a mark, Are they not? Yes, the marshal said, those are not for the Kai, those are for the others. What others? The marshal smiled. There was no warmth in it. Ambassador, when your people called for help, who else did you call? Tell me their names. Larenthi listed them. The Vor, the old hegemony, the Drift Republics, the Stone Speakers, the Yellow Fleet, 6 great civilizations. Beyond the Concordian border, all older, all stronger in their own way, all with the power to send help. None had answered. The signals had been heard, the signals had been ignored. They heard you scream. The marshal said, they chose silence. We are saving you, yes. But we are also speaking, ambassador, with very loud voices. To all of them, we are saying that this thing they did, this turning away, will not be a free thing to do. There will be a cost. The cost is that we are now here, and we will not leave. And we remember, you are punishing them. No, we are not even angry at them. They did what they thought was safe. We are simply making they think differently. The next time a small race calls for help somewhere in this galaxy, every great power will pause. They will think, maybe humans are listening, maybe humans will come if we do not, maybe it is better to send help than to wait and see. In the days that followed, the silent powers received visits, polite visits. Human ambassadors arrived in their courts. The ambassadors did not bring threats. They brought gifts. They asked only one question. The question was always the same. They asked it in soft voices. They asked it many times. They wrote down the answers. Then they left. The question was, why did you not answer? And the silent powers, who had been silent for many reasons, found that they did not have a good answer. None of the reasons sounded good when spoken out loud. They began to feel something they had not felt in a long time. They began to feel watched. Vor, who were the oldest of the silent powers, sent a message to Earth. They said they were sorry. They said they had been wrong. They said they wanted to send help now, even though the war was almost over. The humans thanked them politely. The humans said help would be welcome. The Vor sent a small fleet. The fleet was put to work cleaning up after the main battles, picking up the bodies, moving the wounded. It was honest work. The Vor did it without complaint. They understood by then what was being asked of them. Old hegemony tried something different. They sent a message saying they had not heard the call. They said their listening posts had been broken at that time. The humans listened to this message. The humans did not say if they believed it or not. They simply asked in their next message if the hegemony would be willing to share their listening post records so that everyone could be sure the records were correct in the future. The hegemony said yes. The records came. The records were not very interesting, but the act of sending them was the point. The hegemony had bent. They had shown a soft spot. The humans wrote it down. The list grew. The Cathar were not killed to the last one. The humans did not finish them. They drove them back, all the way back, across many lengths of space, until the swarms came at last to the place where they had begun. It was a strange place at the edge of the galaxy. Old stars burned there. Strange storms moved through the dust. The Cathar had a home there in a system of dead worlds. The humans drove them inside it. Then the humans built a wall. The wall was not made of stone or metal. It was made of weapons. Quiet weapons, watching weapons. They sat in space all around the Cathar. Home. They were waiting. If any Cathar ship tried to leave, the weapons would wake up. They would burn the ship to nothing. The Cathar had learned in the last weeks of the war what would happen to them if they came out again. They had learned this lesson very deep. The hive mind shook when it thought of leaving the home system. It would not leave, not now. Not in 100 years. Maybe not ever. The humans put up a sign. In many languages. The sign was a beacon that could be heard far across space. It said, beyond this line the beasts wait, pass with care. Whether the sign was about the Kai or about the humans, no one was sure. Maybe both. The Concordium did not go back to what it had been. It could not. Too much had changed. Too many old rules had broken. The 7 civilizations met, and they talked for a long time, and out of their talks came a new alliance. It was called the Sol Compact. The humans were part of it now, equal to any other. So were the Concordium races. So in time were many of the silent powers who came forward and asked to join. The humans let them in. They were polite. They smiled. But they did not forget. The new compact was not like the old Concordium. It had different rules. The rules were short and clear, and a little bit hard. The first rule was that any race that called for help and was inside the borders of the compact would receive help. There would be no debates. There would be no slow voting. The closest fleet of any race would go. This was the law. The humans had asked for this rule, and the others had agreed, because nobody wanted to look like they were against helping a small race in trouble. The second rule was that races who heard a call for help and did not thing would be marked, not punished. Exactly, just marked. Their names would be remembered. Trade with them would be at hard terms. They would be the last to receive new technology. They would not be invited to the best meetings. This rule, too, the humans had asked for. Nobody had been willing to argue against it, even though many of the great powers did not like it. The new compact had a list of names. The list held the names of all the great powers that had been silent during the dark days. The list was kept in a quiet room on a station near Earth. It was not used to punish anyone. It was just there. The names did not get worse over time. They did not get better either. Trade with those powers was done at hard terms. Treaties with them were short and clear. Their words were heard, but their words did not weigh as much as other words. The list did not need to do anything. The list only needed to exist. Everyone knew about it. That was enough. Larenthi did not go home for a long time. She had been a small ambassador once. Now she was something else. She was the woman who had broken the rule. She was the woman who had called the beasts. Some of her people loved her for it. Some of her people did not speak her name. Both groups were right. In their way, she took a job on a new ship. The ship was a mixed thing. Half of it was grown like a sail ship. Half of it was built like a human ship. The two halves did not fight each other. They worked together. The ship was lovely and strong. Larenthi was the first non-human officer on board. There would be many more in the years to come. But she was the first. She walked the bridge often in the long quiet shifts. She thought about many things. She thought about her daughter who was alive, who was now 10, who could read very well now. She thought about her. People alive on a world that should have been bare rock. She thought about the HFY alive in their cage, breeding their hive in the dark, marked deep with the smell of fear. She thought about the silent powers who were now polite and worried and full of questions. About humans, she thought about humans themselves who had walked back into the galaxy after 2,000 years and had not asked permission. She thought most of all about the silence of the stars. The silence had been so heavy. In the days when she had pressed the screen to call Earth, she had felt it like a great stone on her chest. She had thought she would die under that stone and her people with her. The silence had not broken because of any law of the universe. It had broken because she had pressed a screen and somebody very far away had been listening for 2,000 years and had picked up the call on the bridge of her ship. Larenthi spoke to the human officer next to her. He was a young man with red hair and a quick smile. "Why did you wait so long?" she asked. 2,000 years listening in case a call came. "Why? You did not know us. You owed us nothing. Why did you keep listening?" The young man thought for a moment. "My grandmother used to say something," he said. "She said, in the dark when nobody hears you cry, the worst thing is not the dark, the worst thing is finding out later that someone could hear you and chose not to listen. She said we were not going to be those people. We were going to be people who answered." He looked out at the stars. "So we listened," he said. "For a long time we listened. Just in case." Larenthi nodded slowly. She did not say anything more. She just stood and looked at the stars. Many years later, on a small colony world far from Earth, an old woman sat in a garden. Her hair was white and her hands were thin. Her name had been Idris Akenko Vance, and once, long ago, she had been a fleet marshal. Now she only kept a garden. Her granddaughter played near her, a small girl of maybe 6 years. A ship landed nearby. It was a Concordium ship, one of the old-grown kinds. 3 Concordium people came out. They came to the garden. They did not speak. They only bowed very low in the old sailway. They placed a small gift on the table. They bowed again. Then they left. The little girl came to her grandmother. She had seen the visitors. She climbed into the old woman's lap. "Grandma," she said, "why do the aliens look so nervous when they come to see us?" The old woman smiled. The smile reached her eyes. The first real smile she had given in a long time. "Sweetheart," she said, "a long time ago, the galaxy was very quiet and somebody very far away was crying for help. Many people heard. Most of them stayed quiet. They did not want to get hurt. They did not want trouble. They thought it was safer to say nothing at all. That was bad of them." The little girl said. "Yes," the old woman said. "It was. But we were listening too. And we were not the staying quiet kind. We were the running kind. So we ran. We ran a long way with all the strong things we had built, and we went to help. Did you save them?" "We saved them, and we taught some lessons too. Lessons that are still being learned even today. That is why the aliens are nervous, sweetheart, because they know who we are. Now they know we listen. They know we come." The little girl thought about this. She was quiet for a moment. Then she leaned her head on her grandmother's shoulder. "I am glad we are the running kind," she said. The old woman held her close. Outside the Garden, the stars were beginning to come. Out one by one in the deep blue of evening, they burned, all of them. Bright and warm and many, none of them were silent, not anymore.